everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Brad Schacht and myself here, Daniel Taylor, here to talk to you about something really important that could have potential impact to your environment. And that's the unification of the Datamart and the Fabric data warehouse. We have this blog post put together within our Microsoft Power BI update blogs. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scroll down here because there's some highlights in here. And I'm leaving you all with some homework. The link to this blog is going to be down in the bottom of the video, but I want you to do your homework and go through and read this blog. The reason for unification, there's a couple things here I'm excited about. DDL and DML support, AI integration, right? Everything AI these days, source control capabilities. And if I scroll down a little bit further, we get the flexible licensing of the Fabric data warehouse, and we have the direct lake model. We also have some data recovery in there. And if you're a DBA like me, you like to be able to recover your data. Brad, anything within this that excites you about this unification of the Datamart and the Fabric data warehouse?
Yeah, I think the really cool thing about this is customers have, for a long time, had the ability to go create data marts inside the Power BI world. And we heard loud and clear from folks that they like the ability to have that database in there. They want to have that nice structured place to be able to land data, have the SQL-like experience. But we've heard from the beginning that folks want more control. You want to be able to go and create more tables, manage things through T-SQL the way that you would with any other data warehouse or SQL server inside of your environment. And so this is really giving us an opportunity to say, look, we're going to give you that same data mart experience. You don't have to worry about managing servers. You can load data in a very easy way with things like data flows and stuff like that. We can still have your built-in semantic model. We'll touch on some of that stuff later. So all the things that you know and love about the data mart experience, we're going to give you that, plus all the other things that come along with having a full SQL environment that you get inside the data warehouse. So being able to do things like copy data in with T-SQL or load data in with copy data pipelines inside of Data Factory. So everything else that you can do inside the warehouse. And we give you basically unlimited scale here. So there is a size limitation on data marts, and that really goes away with the data warehouse side of things. So if you are hitting up against any of those limits, we do have some customers that are up against the limits of the size of a data mart. Oh, now if you want to go load multi-terabyte 10, 20, 30 terabytes worth of data into your data warehouse, you can absolutely do that. So it's a really great experience being able to go from having the managed environment, but now at much greater scale and with all these other things that Fabric has to offer, like you were mentioning, things like AI integration, the ability to have the data already reflected inside of one lake to be able to use things like the Spark environment, basically everything else that the Fabric environment has to offer. So I think it's going to be really great for all the customers out there using this today.
All right. So what are our next steps, right, Brad? So our next steps are this. So what folks need to know is starting on June 1st, which is literally just right around the corner, you will no longer be able to create a data mart. What you'll see on your screen when you try and do this is something similar. The message you're seeing here on my screen or provided in this blog post. With this happening on June 1st, there's something that we need to do and we need to call out. With existing data marts, Brad, and this is something very important I think folks need to know, is on October 1st, starting on October 1st, Power BI Datamarts will not be supported and data marts will be cleaned up from workspaces. I think that's really important. So it's not that they're just going to hang out there. We are going to take an action and we are going to clean those up. So to avoid losing that data and breaking your reports built on top of these, we recommend you migrate to the Fabric data warehouse. Anything else, Brad?
Yeah, I cannot stress that date enough that you mentioned in there, Dan. October 1st. Folks are just going to wake up on October 1st. They're going to open up their Fabric environment, and all of those data marts that you had in there are just going to be gone. Now, again, like Dan mentioned, you're not going to do anything. They're just going to no longer be there. When we say cleaned up, we're not talking like soft delete and you can call support and be able to get those restored or anything. They will be gone at that point. So Again, cannot stress the importance of October 1st as the deadline for this enough for folks.
There's some additional considerations. Once again, I told you at the beginning of this video, you have some homework to do. I recommend going through and reading this blog from end to end with respect to additional considerations around enabling the custom semantic model in your Fabric data warehouse. Some great information here. Scripting out any row level security and reapply as needed. I'm going to let Brad talk about this here in a second, and setting up incremental refresh with Dataflow Gen 2. But Brad, I'm going to throw it over to you real quick before, and stick with us, folks. We're getting ready to go to the demo, which is really exciting. And we'll talk about that here in a second after I allow Brad to talk about scripting out any RLS and reapply as needed.
Yeah, so two things I'll call out in this section. First of all, with Datamarts, you have kind of the no-code experience for setting up row-level security. Very similar to what you would do inside of a Power BI semantic model. You've got a button in the UX that says to set up roles, then you apply the security, say I want to secure it on this particular column, say I only want somebody to be able to see this particular state, and say I want them to see everything in the southeast. So it's a very low code, no code type of experience that you have. When we move over into the data warehouse world, we've got a lot more flexibility now because we get the full capabilities of SQL Server row level security, column level security, all those sort of things that come into play here. So all we want to call out there is if you do have existing row level security on your Datamarts, consider what that might look like in this new world, and consider possibly moving that over to even be row level security inside the SQL Server world, or in this case, data warehouse. The other thing I'll mention is related to that default semantic model. Dan, if you can scroll up just a little bit for me. So I mentioned that a lot of things in the Datamart world were kind of done for you by default. You add tables in, and they just automatically show up inside the semantic model. Well, that's not the default behavior for the semantic model inside the warehouse. What this section is calling out for you, though, is if you want to have that very similar experience where everything just shows up for you, this tells you to sync the default semantic model to all the tables that are in my warehouse. That way, as I add new tables into my warehouse, those will become available to me in the semantic model. Just call out here, that does only apply to the default semantic model as noted inside of that particular setting there.
All right, with the blog post covered, we've covered all those details. Do your homework. We have two ways that we can take our existing data marts and migrate to the Fabric data warehouse experience. We can use option 2, which can use manual steps to migrate our data mart to the warehouse. And there's some details there. That's not what we're doing today, folks. You can go through and read the blog about that and go to our documentation. What has been done by our product group, Bradley Schacht here and Alex Powers, is they've put together this accelerator that we're showing here on this screen, these accelerator scripts. And what this is going to help you do is accelerate your data mart migration process to the Fabric data warehouse. And remember, we have that October 1st deadline in mind. So this is going to help you get over there quicker. Flipping over from the blog post over here to our Fabric data warehouse environment, we have some things here on the screen, Brad, that you're showing. Would you like to talk about those?
Yeah, so what we're going to do next is we're going to walk you through end to end how you can use the accelerator to get from your data mart into your data warehouse. And what we've got here is a workspace setup with a few pieces just to get us started. To begin with, we've got our data mart down here. And inside of that, we've got just a few tables from the Wide World Importers Data Warehouse dataset. Okay, so data model that everybody's probably familiar with at this point if you're coming from the Microsoft world. The other thing that we have here is, of course, the default semantic model that goes along with our data mart that has all those tables inside of it, and a report that's tied to that default semantic model. So that one's called sales analysis. Then what we've already gone and done, just so we don't have to do the clicks for this, is we've set up a warehouse already that we're going to migrate into called Wide World Importers DW. Now, that warehouse is completely empty. There's nothing inside of it, no tables, no schemas, nothing like that. So it's a blank slate for us to go to. And what we're going to do now, like I said, is walk through how do we get things from our data mart into our warehouse. Okay, so to get started, we're going to head over to the Fabric toolbox. The Fabric Toolbox is a collection of scripts, samples, and accelerators that you can use across all the different things inside of your Fabric environment. To get to the accelerator for moving data marts to warehouses, inside the Fabric Toolbox, we've got a collection of scripts, samples, and accelerators to help you do things across the entire Fabric environment. For what we want to do today, you're going to navigate into the accelerators folder, and then you're going to locate the Power BI to Fabric Data Warehouse Modernization folder. Now here's everything that we're going to need to do this migration for the rest of this video. This is also linked in the blog post that Dan and I were talking about at the beginning of the video. There's 3 sections to this that we're going to walk through. The first one here is moving all of the schema. So that's going to be your schema and your tables from the Datamart into our data warehouse. So that's going to be this very first section inside of here. The next thing that we need to do is we need to migrate the semantic model and all of the reports. That's going to be the second piece. And then the third one down here at the bottom, which is an optional step, but we're going to walk you through this today as well, is how to move the data flows that load your data marts and convert those over to data flows Gen 2 to be able to load your data warehouse. Okay? So to get started here, you'll see that we're going to need a few pieces of information. We're going to need our Datamart server address, the actual name of your Datamart, which is going to be the SQL database name, not the name inside of Fabric, the data warehouse server address, the data warehouse name that you're migrating to, what schema inside the data warehouse do we want to put all of our tables into, and then also the tenant ID. Now this last one might seem a little strange, but the reason for that is because we're actually going to do this whole move of just the DDL items using a PowerShell script. And in order to authenticate into the environment, you have to have your tenant ID for that process. And we'll take a look at that here in just a moment.
So Brad, there's some things there that you mentioned, like I don't know quite where to grab this information, right? And if I'm starting from scratch with this accelerator, can you provide some details on where to grab some of this information from that we need to fill in?
All right, to get started, let's just work down that list of items that we needed to pick up the information for. To start with, we'll use our Wide World Importers Datamart. We'll click on the ellipsis, and then we're going to click on Copy SQL Connection String. From this dialog box, make sure you click the copy button and then store that someplace safe. Go grab a notepad or something like that and paste it inside there. We're going to need that in just a couple of minutes, so keep it close by. Next thing we'll do is we need to get the Datamart's name. Now, normally you would look at this and probably say, well, it's just Wide World Importers. But in reality, to connect to that database, there's actually a different database name behind the scenes. What we can do is if we open up our Datamart here, we can go to New SQL Query, or I can just open up this query that I've already got. If you type the text in there, select DB name, open paren, close paren, so DB underscore name, open close paren, and run that. This right here is actually the name that we're going to want to copy. So again, take that, put it into your notepad, keep it someplace close by. The next thing that we need to do is grab the warehouse server name and the warehouse's name. We'll do a similar process here. We'll hover over the data warehouse, click on the ellipsis, and then we'll find on the list here for Copy SQL Connection String, and we're going to copy this one. Don't be fooled, it looks very similar to the one that we were looking at for the Datamart, but you'll notice that there is a very slight difference in that URL where one of them says .data warehouse inside the address there. So make sure you copy that one, put it someplace safe. Next, we're going to need the data warehouse name. In this case, it's actually the name that you see on the screen. In our case, that's going to be Wide World Importers DW. There's no special name behind this one whatsoever. The next item on the list, number 5, was the schema that you want the data to be going into. So just keep that in your mind or add it to your list of items that we're going to need here in just a moment. In our case, in just a minute, we're just going to use Datamart. All right, the final piece of information that we need to get is our tenant ID. To do that, we'll navigate to this question mark up here on the ribbon, and then we're going to select the About Power BI button. I do want to call out some difference that you might see in your environment. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see that I'm on the Power BI experience. If you are on the Fabric experience, this button is actually going to say About Fabric instead. So just know yours might be slightly different than that. So select About Power BI, and you're going to see a lot of really useful information here. The piece that we want, though, is going to be the tenant URL. At the very end of that, you'll see it says CTID equals followed by a long GUID. You want everything after that equals sign, and you would, again, want to copy that and put it over into your notepad because we're going to need that to do the next piece of this process. Okay, with all the information that we need to do this first part of the migration, it's time to actually do some work. Okay? To get started, we're going to download the PowerShell script that's linked under the first step in the instructions. By clicking on this schema and table creation script, you'll notice that it opens up a PS1 file. So schema and table migration.ps1. A couple ways you can do this. If you'd like to, you can just copy and paste everything in here into the IDE of your choice, or you can click on this little download button up in the top right-hand corner of the screen. I've already downloaded this file, and I've got it open inside of VS Code, where the PowerShell extension already ready to go. Over in VS Code, we've already got our script downloaded and opened. Again, you could just open the script directly inside the terminal if you'd like, or inside the PowerShell IDE and run the script from there. Over in VS Code, we're ready to go. We've already got our PowerShell script open. You're more than welcome to open this inside of the PowerShell IDE if you want to, or you can open this up inside the terminal and just run the script from there. There's no parameters to fill out ahead of time. We're going to prompt you for all the information that you need along the way. So go ahead and grab your PowerShell script, open it up, and then also have that notepad handy so that you're ready to go. Once you've got those two things, click on the play button up in the top right-hand corner, and the script will run. Again, we're going to prompt you for the information that we need along the way. The first thing that we need is the server address for our Datamart. So we'll go ahead and paste that in from our notepad, and then we'll see the next thing it asks for is our Datamart name. If you recall, the Datamart name was at not quite the same database name as what our Datamart was actually named. So we had Wide World Importers, but our Datamart name here is going to be that Power BI prod name and then a bunch of other nonsense underneath that. So next thing we need to do is paste in our data warehouse server name. If you recall, I mentioned that the names of these two were very similar, but you'll notice that this one has datawarehouse.fabric.microsoft.com versus datamart.fabric.microsoft.com. After that, we'll give this our data warehouse name, which in our case here is Wide World Importers DW. Next, we'll determine which schema we want the tables to live in. In this case, we're going to use Datamart for our schema. And then finally, we need to provide the tenant ID for our environment. What's going to happen now is you're going to be prompted to log in with your credentials. All right, now that we're authenticated, we're all ready to go. Your experience might be slightly different. If you have a lot of subscriptions inside of your environment, you might be prompted to select a default subscription. It doesn't actually matter in this case which subscription you choose from that list, but just know that it probably will prompt you to select number 1 through whatever subscription number on the list. At this point, you'll see that our schema and tables have now been successfully migrated over to our Fabric data warehouse. So let's hop back over to the Fabric environment and validate that move completed successfully. And then over here, there's that new schema that we just created called Datamart. And if we expand this out, you'll see there's all of our tables. We have the city table, date, sale, and then stock item.
All right, that's really cool. That's really cool. But I'm looking at it. I got my schema. I've got my tables, but I feel like we're missing some things. I feel like we're missing our semantic model, possibly missing our data, right? I know we're missing our data. So what are our next steps with this accelerator?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is going to get us the base. Now we've got to do all the other things that depend on our Datamart. So for that, let's hop back over to our GitHub repo and go from there. Back over in GitHub, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back to the Power BI to Fabric Data Warehouse Modernization folder, and we're going to scroll down past this first step, and we're going to look at step number 2, which is how to move the semantic model and our reports over to connect to this new data warehouse that we just built. We'll deal with the data a little bit later. Just like the first section, where we had to gather a few pieces of information before we ran our PowerShell script, we want to gather a few pieces of information before we run our notebook. So as you can see here, we've got to grab a couple of things, but they're all pieces of information that are actually sitting on the right-hand side of our screen already. Now, you certainly could do this where you migrate into a secondary workspace. So you'll see some things that for this demo are going to be a little bit redundant, but if you do want to move to another workspace, will be very important and key pieces for you to keep in mind as you gather the values for these parameters. The first thing we need is the Datamart workspace name. In our case, you can see that that is called Datamart Migration. Next, we need the name of the Datamart data set. Again, as you can see, it's Wide World Importers. We'll need the name of the semantic model workspace. This is going to be the new workspace where the semantic model is going to go. Again, in our case, we're going to keep it right here inside this Datamart migration workspace, but you could optionally move this to a brand new workspace if you'd like to. Next, we need the semantic model name. In this case, it's going to be what we want the new model to be named. So you can keep the same name if you're going to a new workspace, but obviously we can't have two models with the same name inside the same workspace, so we are going to opt to have a new name. Next, we need the item workspace name. This is going to be where our data warehouse lives. Again, we kept it all inside the one workspace, so we're just going to do Datamart migration. The item name, which would be the name of our data warehouse, is Wide World Importers DW. Schema name is going to be the same schema name that we used in the previous PowerShell script in the schema where all the tables live inside of our data warehouse. Finally, the item type, we're going to make sure to set that to warehouse when we get inside the notebook. You can set this to lakehouse if you want to, if you happen to have moved this over to a lakehouse, but for the purposes of the accelerator, everything is built around the data warehouse experience, so we're going to keep that as warehouse. To handle all of the migration pieces dealing with reports and the semantic model, we built a handy notebook to go along with this. Under step number 2, select the Power BI Semantic Model Migration Notebook, and then click the download button in the top right corner of the screen. Back over inside of our Fabric workspace, we're going to import the notebook that we just got off the GitHub repo. From the ribbon, select Import, Notebook, and then from this computer. We'll click the Upload button in the flyout, and then select the Datamart Migration Python Notebook. Give that just a couple of seconds, and then the notebook will show up inside of our workspace. We're going to open the notebook, and then we're going to go through and fill in all the parameters that we just talked about a moment ago. We built the notebook very similar to the way that we built the PowerShell script. It only needs a couple of parameters, and everything else is going to be handled for you. The main way that we're going to be doing this migration is through something called Semantic Link Labs. We can put a description or a link down in the description for what Semantic Link Labs is, but that's going to actually do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. To be able to use that, we'll run this first cell to do the pip install of the Semantic Link Labs library.
Now, this is just installing the library. I get this question a lot, Brad. This is just installing the library for this particular session. It's not installing it within their environment.
That's correct. This will be contained to this notebook session and nothing else. All right. With Semantic Link Labs now imported, we need to set all of our variables. You'll notice that the variable names here match the information we just talked about inside the GitHub repo. So go ahead and run this cell to set all of our variables. The next cell here is going to be creating the functions that we're going to need to do all of the migration work. So just run that cell. It'll run very quickly. We'll reference those here in just a moment. The next cell is actually where all the heavy lifting is going to happen. You'll notice that first of all, we're going to create a blank semantic model. Then we're going to run that function that we just scrolled past. That's going to copy all the tables from Datamart semantic model over into our new semantic model that we just created. And then everything else in here is going to move all the other objects, refresh the semantic model, and have it ready to go for us out the other end. So we'll go ahead and run this cell. Shouldn't take very long, but as this runs, we scroll down here, you'll notice a few different things happen. And it's going to print those different activities up here on the screen. at this point, you'll see that it has now created our new semantic model called Wide World Importers Migrated. You'll see the semantic model that it was based off of. And then if we scroll through here, you'll see everything from our Datamart semantic model that has been moved over. All of the tables, all of the columns have been added, all of those, any measures that we might have inside of here as well, hierarchies. Here you'll see that the relationships, because we obviously need to have relationships between our tables, and we want to make sure that those come over as well, so that as I filter by city, it reflects that on my sale table. So all of our relationships. In this case, you'll also notice that I had a row level security role in there called sales territory that got moved over. And then you'll see down here at the bottom that all the objects have now been moved over. So if anything happens along the way, you'll see any errors that pop up in there. Then at the very end, we're going to do a refresh of the semantic model.
All right, so let me get this straight, Brad. What we just did there by executing this part of the accelerator is you took all of those items that you just mentioned there from our existing Datamart, and you have exported them and then imported them, or essentially created our new Power BI semantic model over in our workspace?
Yeah, that's right. So rather than having to go rebuild all that stuff, re-add all the tables, rebuild my relationships, rebuild my security, all that stuff has now been created. But you know what? We can actually just go back over here to our workspace level, and we can see now that we have this new wide world importers migrated semantic model right down here inside of our workspace. So that's where everything now exists. The thing that we're missing, though, is we're still missing reports and we're still missing our data. So what do you say we tackle that next?
Yeah, so I was going to tell you, you can go now and go hang out and have some ramen or something good. You've earned it, but I don't have data.
Not quite.
We need to get our
Not
data
quite.
over here. So let's do that next.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's go ahead and move all of our reports. There's a couple
Oh,
of ways to do this. Now, if you scroll down here, first of all, we've got some little quality checks built in along the way. So if we run this cell here, you'll see that any objects that weren't able to be migrated will show up inside this list here. So in this case, 100% all the objects were migrated from our Datamart semantic model over to our new warehouse semantic model. The
bravo.
next thing, yeah, very nice. The next thing we'll do here is move all the reports. Now, there's two ways to do this, like I mentioned. We can either run the first cell that's going to say, give me every single report that is tied to this semantic model and rebind those over to our new data warehouse semantic model. Or I can say, you know what, there's some specific reports that I want to move, but I'm not quite ready to move everything off of that semantic model just yet. So I could come down here and do those reports one by specifying the workspace name and report name that I want to move. So either one of these will work, just depends on your particular needs.
All right, that's really cool, but I just need a little clarification here. So if I run this rebind all reports, it's going to go out and it's going to look at all my workspaces, and any reports that were using that old semantic model that is being decommissioned, it will now point all those reports from all my workspaces to the new semantic model that we just created in the new workspace.
Yep, absolutely. Does it all for you just in the click of a button.
That's pretty cool, because we may not know that somebody, because in this world of self-service BI, we may not know somebody's using that data mart, and this will cover that for us. Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely. There's all kinds of cool stuff inside Semantic Link Labs that you would just spend hours and hours of your time doing. To show you what this looks like, Dan, let's go actually back over here to our workspace, and let's open up this sales analysis report real quick. Now, brace yourself. This is going to be probably the most beautiful report you've ever seen because I created it. And all the Power BI report developers out there right now, they're like, wow, I need to go take a class from Brad on how to build beautiful reports. But this is our report.
I'm blown
Now,
away.
I know, amazing. Now, let's go back over and migrate this report from the existing Datamart semantic model over to our
Yes.
data warehouse one. So over here inside of our notebook, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to do the rebind all objects. So we'll click on run on that cell. Just take a moment here since we've only got just the one report. And you'll see now that our sales analysis report has been successfully rebinded to our new semantic model that we created called Wide World Importers Migrated. So again, we didn't even tell it which report to look at. We just said, hey, here's the old semantic model, here's the new one, go figure it out. Let's go back over to our report. Let's go ahead and do a quick refresh on this and make sure that everything's working properly. If I refresh my report, Dan, I think we might have a problem.
Okay.
All of our data's gone, which tells me that we're actually looking at the correct semantic model, because what have we not yet migrated?
Well, first off, I was going to ask you, is there a way to check easily if I've moved over to the correct semantic model? And yes, you've made it easy here. I'm guessing that we're missing our data.
We are missing our data. So let's just do one last thing, show folks the rest of that notebook, and then we'll do the very last step, which is getting our data over. So back in our notebook, if we scroll all the way down to the very bottom, there's this one other section that says show unsupported objects, because there are some things that we can't move over. There's documentation that will point you to if any of these happen to apply. In our case, this is going to produce a bunch of blank things because everything migrated was able to move over perfectly fine. But be sure that you run this just in case you do happen to have some unsupported objects inside your semantic models. Now, last piece, Dan. How do we get that data over?
I'm excited. This is my favorite part. Data in a data warehouse.
We're going to go back over to our GitHub repo, navigate back over to the modernization accelerator here, and scroll all the way to the very bottom. Now, we've already moved over our DDL, we've already moved over our semantic models, we've moved over all of our reports. We need to get the data. And how do you load data into a Datamart? With data flows. But what we need to do now is move from the existing functionality that's in Datamarts and move that over to Dataflows Gen 2. Now, again, this is kind of where the adventure goes wherever you want. You don't have to move this over to Dataflows Gen 2. You can switch this over and reload the data with a copy activity. You can use the new copy job if you want to. You could go put the data out into ADLS or something and import it with a copy into with T-SQL. Really, the world is your oyster in this case, and you can do it whatever you want. But since we want to make this migration as easy as possible, we're going to take the existing data flows and move them over to Dataflows Gen 2. So the way that we're going to do this, navigate back into our Fabric environment, and we're going to open up our Datamart. Once our Datamart loads, you're going to click on the Transform Data button up on the ribbon. On the resulting Power Query window, you're going to take a look on the ribbon from the Home tab, and you want to click Export Template from the Share section all the way over on the far right-hand side. On the Export Template screen, you want to give this a name. We'll type in here Datamart Migration, and then click OK. This is going to download just a single file that's in .pqt format that we will then turn around and upload. This is a Power Query template. Now, this is going to go to the Downloads folder on your computer, so just grab that and be ready to use it here in just a moment. What we'll do is we'll close out of this Power Query window, click the X up here at the top, and then navigate back over to our workspace. Next, we're going to click New Item from on the ribbon, and then we want to select a Dataflow Gen 2. Now, I happen to have this on my favorites list, but you, by default, will probably switch over here to all items. You can either select it from the Get Data section, or you can use the filter up in the top right, type in Dataflow, and locate Dataflow Gen 2. So on our new Dataflow Gen 2 screen, just give this some sort of name. I'm just going to call ours Datamart Migration to keep with the theme here, and select Create. Now, this is going to create us a blank slate for our data flow. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to click this button on the main screen that says Import from a Power Query template, which, as you recall, we just downloaded from our Datamart. So select Import from Power BI or Power Query template. Inside my Downloads folder, I'm going to select the Datamart migration.pqt that we just created. Click the Open button. And now you'll see my Power Query template has populated with everything. But the first thing that we need to do is authenticate back to our data source. In this case, it happens to be coming from a SQL server and the Wide World Importers DW database. We'll click the Configure Connection button, and then we'll just select Connect. You might need to come in here and edit the connection to change it to a different account or possibly switch the credentials. But in my case, I'm using the same intra ID no matter what. So I'm just going to click the Connect button. And you'll notice over there on the query list on the left-hand side here in just a second, each one of the queries, because it uses that same connection, are going to light up and they're no longer going to have that warning on them. So we're almost done. At this point, we now need to go through each one of our tables and we need to bind them to a table inside of our data warehouse. To do that, we're going to go in the far bottom right-hand corner of the screen where it says Data Destination, and we're going to click the little plus icon, and we're going to select More from the list. Now in this case, we're loading our city table, so we want to load this into our Wide World Importers DW data warehouse that's inside of our Datamart migration workspace. And then we want to select existing table and select datamart.city. Okay, so you remember when we did our PowerShell script back in step number 1, we told it to land this into the Datamart schema, and in this case, the city table. So we'll do datamart.city and we'll click next. In our case here, we're fine with just replacing the data that's in there. So we're basically doing a truncate and load on this table, and we'll click the Save Settings button. At this point, you'll want to go back and do this for the other 3 tables, or however many tables you happen to have inside of your Datamart, and rebind those to the appropriate data warehouse table as well. All right, at this point, I've remapped all of my tables to the appropriate tables inside my data warehouse. Now we're ready to publish this. We'll click on the button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that says Publish, or you can tell it to publish this later if you'd like to. Whenever we do Publish Now, though, this is going to save my data flow, going to kick me back into the workspace, and you'll notice that my data flow starts refreshing. You can tell that because we get the little spinning circle that goes next to my data flow. Now that our data flow Gen 2 has finished refreshing, all of our data should be loaded into our data warehouse. If we navigate back over there, we can click on any of the tables in the Object Explorer to open up the preview. In this particular case, we can see that we now have data inside of our city table, which is exactly what we wanted. I'm going to just assume that every other table loaded since we didn't have any errors on our data flow, but you'll probably want to do some sort of validation in your environment. Probably go through and at least run a count on all the tables to start with. Last thing we're going to do is go over to our sales analysis report and see if our data shows up. Last time we visited it, it was completely empty. So when we load our sales analysis, we can now see that we've got data inside of our report. A beautiful report, back up and running. This time, instead of pointing at our Datamart, we've got it pointed to our brand new Fabric data warehouse and unlocks all kinds of new possibilities inside the environment for us.
That's really cool, Brad. So we got all of our data over to our Fabric data warehouse, and the reports are working correctly. Why did we do this? Well, we have a call to action for you folks. As of June 1st, 2025, you will no longer be able to create data marts. We are decommissioning them. Then another important date this year that we want to emphasize really heavily, on October 1st of 2025, we will be going through, Microsoft will be going through and cleaning up your premium or your Fabric workspaces that contain data marts and removing them. Want to emphasize that again. October 1st of this year, data marts will be cleaned up from your environment. We gave you a blog post at the beginning of this video that you have some homework you need to go through and read fully as to why you're doing this. It provides the dates in there. It also has the preferred target for our data mart migration, and that's the Fabric data warehouse. Inside this video also, we provided you 2 methods. We provided you the manual method that you could migrate from your data mart to your Fabric data warehouse, but we also provided this accelerator that was written by the program group to be able to easily migrate your data mart to your Fabric data warehouse. It goes through and creates your schema and table creation. It creates your semantic model migration. It does all that for you. We showed you that you could convert to a dataflow Gen 2 to load your data into the Datamart. Brad, anything that I missed there?
No, that's about it. There's a lot of moving pieces in there. We try to make it as easy as possible for you. Just a couple of scripts, one PowerShell script, download it, fill in some parameters, one Python notebook, download it, fill in some parameters, click run, and you should be up and running fairly easily at that point. Just make sure when you run through that Python notebook, at the very end, check to make sure that there's no leftover things that didn't get converted. But Semantic Link Labs does a really great job of moving pretty much everything that it possibly can. So always make sure to test, of course, out the other end of that. But go out there, take a look at the accelerator. If you have any feedback on that at all, if anything's unclear, if something's not working properly, please post an issue out there on the toolbox. Alex and I will be keeping an eye on that. We'd love to hear from you how this is working out for you.
All right, there we have it, folks. Straight from the PG. If you have any issues with the accelerator, open an issue in the GitHub repo. You also know where we like to keep this going, in the comments down below of the video. And as always, folks, be good to each other.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.